Every time I close my eyes, the first image that appears isn't my wife. It's a 5-year-old girl wearing a worn-out sweater, sitting curled up on a park bench with eyes both curious and timid. That was the first time I met Lily. She didn't say much then, just clung tightly to her mother's hand. Rachel, the woman I fell in love with after a brief meeting at a community center in the suburbs of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Rachel didn't hide anything. She told me straight on our second date, "I'm not looking for a replacement. I'm looking for a man mature enough to understand there's another little heart in my life." I didn't answer right away, but Lily's eyes that day etched into my mind like a strange mark. Something told me that if I stepped into their lives, I wasn't just falling for a woman, I was taking on a mission. I'm Matthew. At the time, I was 31, working as a mechanical engineer at a company that manufactured agricultural equipment. I wasn't wealthy, but I was stable and could offer a peaceful home. 3 years later, we got married. Lily called me Uncle Matt for a long time, until one day, while I was fiddling with her little purple bike, I heard a soft voice behind me. "Dad, the back wheel is loose." I remember turning around, speechless, staring at her without knowing what to say. From that moment on, I knew, even without blood ties, I had become a father in her eyes. I taught Lily how to balance on a bike. Every fall left her knees scraped and bleeding, but I was always the one bringing the towel, applying dolphin-shaped band-aids, and telling her she was as strong as a superhero. I carried her in my arms when she had a high fever in the middle of a winter night, while Rachel frantically searched for a thermometer. I stood backstage during her first elementary school performance, cheering her on as she memorized an autumn poem all week. I showed up at every parent-teacher meeting, every weekend softball game, every prom rehearsal. I was the one who took pictures of Lily in her navy blue graduation dress when she finished high school. The radiant smile, sparkling eyes, everything I had dreamed of. I was also the one who withdrew nearly all the savings I had built up over 15 years of work to cover her college tuition in Wisconsin. Not just tuition, books, dorm fees, meals, even a used car so she could get to her internship. Nearly $75,000 in total. Not a small number for a man who had never earned 6 figures in his life. But I never once thought of asking for anything. I never mentioned gratitude or repayment. I just wanted Lily to have what she deserved, a future her mother once gave up because she was too young when she got pregnant. I don't know when I stopped thinking my wife's daughter and simply thought, my daughter. That's why I wasn't prepared for the shock that followed, a cold truth that turned all those beautiful memories to ashes. We'll get to that part later, because everything began with love. A love without blood, without conditions, but one that took root in my heart for over 20 years, until I realized that sometimes love alone isn't enough. When Lily announced her engagement to Tyler, I felt a joy rise in me that I couldn't put into words. The little girl who used to cry into her pillow over bad grades had become a confident woman, able to choose her own happiness. I didn't know much about Tyler, had only met him a few times during the holidays, but Lily said he was gentle, kind, and truly loved her. As long as that was true, I had no objection. Lily sent the wedding invitation by mail. That surprised me a little since we usually texted every week, called often. Still, I didn't think much of it. I peeled off the cream-colored wrapping, opened the card, and had to read it 3 times to believe what I was seeing. My name wasn't listed under Who Walks the Bride Down the Aisle, not Mr. Matthew Carter. Not a single mention of me anywhere prominent, just a name dropped in the guest list. Below, a few distant relatives I had never even met. I stared at the name listed under Escort to the Bride, Mr. Gregory Ward. Gregory, Lily's biological father. The man who had vanished for nearly all of her childhood. The man who didn't call once during her 4 years in college, never contributed $1, never checked on her chronic asthma, and now he was the one being honored in the most sacred moment of her life. I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was just for show. Maybe Lily was trying to please someone. I made excuses in my mind, even as every instinct in me screamed otherwise. The next day I called Lily. She picked up after the 5th ring, her voice cheerful as if there was nothing wrong. I asked gently, without beating around the bush. "Lily, did you choose Gregory to walk you down the aisle?" She paused for a moment, then answered calmly, like she was talking about the weather. "Yes, because he's my biological father. I've always dreamed of him walking me down the aisle one day." A blast went off in my head, not because of the words, but because of how Lily said them, casually, without hesitation, as if the past 20 years hadn't existed. I didn't argue, didn't beg. I didn't bring up the nights I carried her to the ER during asthma attacks at 8. I didn't mention selling my old truck to pay her final semester's tuition when my company delayed payroll. I just stayed quiet. Quiet because if I had to remind her of all that just to be acknowledged, maybe it was never truly recognized in the first place. The wedding was held at a vineyard in Oregon, where Tyler's family traditionally hosted ceremonies. I arrived on time, wearing a gray suit I had tailored, not to make a statement, but because I once imagined myself holding Lily's hand, walking her step by step toward marriage, like any father would. But instead, I sat silently in the fourth row, watching from afar like a bystander. When the music started, Lily walked out arm in arm with Gregory, smiling brightly. Someone behind me whispered, "So touching. The bride's real dad made it back in time to do this." I swallowed hard. During the speeches, Lily's mother, Rachel, spoke of the father who returned just in time to guide his daughter into a new chapter. Everyone clapped. I just felt hollow. No one mentioned me. No words of thanks, not a single glance of appreciation. I was like a shadow among the noisy crowd, recalling every memory, every invisible scar I'd accepted, so my daughter could have a complete childhood. That night, I drove back to the hotel without even noticing the roads I took. The street lights blurred behind the windshield like a taunt. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't think about anything, just let the silence gnaw at me, bit by bit. I didn't cry, didn't get angry. I just felt like someone had peeled off the invisible name tag I had worn for 2 decades. No one can erase your role as a father until the one you love most signs you off. The wedding reception was held in a grand hall decorated in a classic style, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling and silver white ribbons looping around every table. Everything was elegant, perfect, so polished it made you think every relationship in that room was just as flawless. I stood quietly in the back left corner near the door, clutching a champagne glass I hadn't touched, eyes following Lily and Gregory as they laughed and shook hands with guests like 20 years of absence had never happened. No one came over to me, not a greeting from the relatives. Even a few of Rachel's old friends walked past me like I was catering staff. Someone glanced at me, eyes uncertain, then turned away. A middle-aged couple whispered something, chuckled, and looked my way as if I were the unwanted extra in the celebration. I didn't leave. I had spent 2 decades walking beside Lily, and I believed I deserved to witness her moment. But sitting there, surrounded by laughter, lights, and hundreds of congratulations, I felt like a shadow, invisible, non-existent. The speeches began after the main course. I looked at my watch, 8:13 p.m. One by one, people stood up, sharing sweet memories and childhood stories of Lily, all of them centered around Gregory. One person mentioned, the father who returned after all these years to hold his daughter's hand on her big day. Another said, teary-eyed, Lily is so lucky to have a father who's always watched over her path. I sat up straight, still holding my wine glass, but my lips never touched it. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe a thank you? Maybe just a glance from Lily? A sign that she still remembered me during the brightest moment of her life? But no. Everything unfolded as if I had never existed in her childhood, her youth, or the journey that brought her here. To the party, I returned to the hotel earlier than expected. I opened the door, threw my suit jacket onto the chair, and collapsed onto the bed, my mind completely blank. A chime from my phone. Rachel's message. I hope you're not overthinking. This is Lily's happy day. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I was too exhausted to explain things that should never need explanation. I looked in the bathroom mirror. The 39-year-old man staring back felt unfamiliar. Not because I looked older, but because I couldn't recognize myself in those eyes anymore. Something in me had shattered. A quiet collapse, colorless, soundless, but irreversible. I had always thought of myself as strong, the pillar, the one who could endure, who would step back so those I loved could move forward. But that night, in a strange hotel room, I realized I had stepped back too far. So far, I'd lost my place in the life of the daughter I once saw as my everything. The next morning, I drove out of wine country, 3 straight hours without turning on the radio. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone anything. Didn't mention the wedding invitation, didn't speak of Gregory, not a word about the lavish ceremony the day before. I just took the suit off the hanger, folded it neatly, and put it in a box, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed somewhere to lock away the feeling of being erased. A few days later, Rachel asked why I hadn't said anything about the wedding. I looked at her and simply replied, I guess there's nothing to tell. Rachel pressed her lips together, said nothing more. She knew. She had always known. But like everyone else, she chose silence. Maybe she was afraid that touching that wound would awaken something that wouldn't stay quiet anymore. From that day on, I started waking up a little later. I stopped making coffee for two. Dinner became a one-person meal. The TV stayed on, but no one watched it. Rachel didn't speak, but she gradually avoided my gaze, and I stopped trying. That invisible feeling at the wedding didn't just kill a part of me, it unearthed something else. A hollow space I still don't know how to fill. A week after the wedding, while I was cleaning out the shed out back, the one that held boxes of keepsakes from Lily's elementary school days, my phone rang. The screen showed her name next to a little yellow heart I'd never found a reason to delete. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. Lily's voice was bright, like no wedding had ever turned me into a stranger. Hey Dad, just calling to check in. How are you? I sat down on an old paint can, brushed off the dust, my heart tangled. Dad. That word, once a point of pride, now just sounded hollow. Still breathing, thanks for asking. Lily kept chatting casually. She told me about the honeymoon in Hawaii. Clear waters, sunset dinners, a villa overlooking the ocean. She used words like dreamy, amazing, unforgettable, but never once mentioned me or anything that happened at the wedding. I didn't interrupt. I listened, just like I used to when she talked about college, roommate fights, or exam nerves. I listened not because the stories were interesting, but because listening had been second nature for 2 decades. Then her tone shifted. Slower, hesitant, but still hopeful. Dad, I need to ask you something a bit awkward. I stayed quiet, already knowing what was coming from the moment the call began. We kind of overspent on the honeymoon, and Andrew's credit card just got capped. Can you help us out? Just a few thousand. I'll pay you back little by little. That voice, sweet, pleading, as if there had never been a crack between us, as if the pain at the wedding had never happened, as if I was still the one always standing behind her, catching whatever broke. I swallowed hard, bitterness rising in my throat. Have you asked Gregory? On the other end, the air stalled. Maybe Lily didn't expect me to mention his name. Not yet, I thought. Maybe it'd be easier with you. But he's your biological father, isn't he? I wasn't harsh. My voice was calm to the point of eerie, a kind of calm that only comes after losing something massive. If you chose him for the most sacred moment of your life, then maybe now's the time for him to prove that it meant something. Lily didn't reply right away. I could picture her lips pressed tight, eyes staring into space, unsure how to respond. I didn't think the wedding would make you feel this way. It's not about the wedding, Lily. It's everything. The forgetting. The choice. You looked at me like a shadow, among people who've known me far longer than Gregory has. I took a breath, paused, then quietly said, I'm not in that place anymore, Lily. At the very least, you should have realized that when you signed that card. Silence. I could hear her deep breathing through the phone, like she was trying not to cry, but I couldn't be the one to wipe her tears this time. Okay, I understand. Sorry for bothering you. Then the long beep. The call ended, like a door shut from the other side. I stared at the phone, then slipped it into my pocket. No anger, no regret, just a strange sense of lightness. So light it scared me. That evening, Rachel sat at the dinner table, her face stern. I heard from Lily that you refused to help. What's going on, Matt? I looked up from my plate, set my fork down. I don't want to be the last resort anymore. I've done everything for the past 20 years, and on the most important day, I didn't exist. That was Lily's choice. Now, let Gregory prove whether that real father title holds any weight. Rachel bit her lip, eyes reddening, but I knew she had no comeback. The first feeling after that refusal wasn't guilt. It was clarity. Like I had just stepped out of a long dream, where I was always the fixer, but never the one who truly had a place in anyone's heart. Rachel waited for me in the living room as I came in from the garage, her frustration barely hidden. The evening news played on the TV as background noise. She turned it off when I set the keys on the counter. "Did you really turn Lily down?" she asked bluntly. I sat down on the sofa across from her, staying calm. "Yes, I don't think it's something I should keep doing anymore." Rachel laughed, not with relief, but with disbelief and frustration. "She needs help, Matthew. I don't get what you're trying to prove. That you can be tough? That you're hurt? What about Lily?" I looked up at her, my voice low and slow. "I'm not trying to prove anything, but if you want the truth, here it is. I'm tired. Tired of pretending I'm okay when I mean nothing in her eyes. Tired of always being the last one called in to clean up the mess someone else left behind. It's not about money, Rachel. It's about self-respect. She's our daughter, Matt." I shook my head. "She's your daughter, and Gregory is the one she called by name in the most important moment of her life. I'm no longer in the picture you're painting. I'm just the name that got crossed out without notice." Rachel froze. A flicker of confusion flashed across her face, but it was quickly masked by restrained anger. "You know Gregory has never been reliable. He disappeared before, and he'll disappear again. And yet you're choosing to step back the moment she needs you most?" "I'm not stepping back. I'm stopping. There's a difference." That sentence sliced through the silence like a knife. Rachel stared at me for a long time, then turned away. She stood, grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen, but didn't drink it, just held it. "I never thought you could be this cruel." I let out a soft laugh, a sharp pain rising in my chest. "You're calling cruel the man who poured nearly $80,000 over almost 10 years to get her through school? The one who never missed a single parent-teacher meeting? The one who rushed her to the hospital at night with a high fever while Gregory didn't even know her blood type?" Rachel set the glass down on the table harder than necessary. "All I ever wanted was to keep this family together, Matt. But if you keep going like this, I don't know what will be left." I looked at her, my voice raspier. "The thing is, Rachel, are we even still a family?" She turned away. Didn't answer. Didn't look at me again for the rest of the night. We ate dinner in silence, the clinking of cutlery the only sound anchoring a meal that had lost its meaning. I tried to bring up replacing the water heater in the garage. She just nodded, said nothing more. Since that day, Rachel stopped asking about Lily, but the way she looked at me changed. No longer the gentle gaze of a wife who once shared every burden. Now it was guarded, puzzled, and at times filled with quiet blame. We still lived under the same roof, still shared a bed, but turned our backs to each other every night. The cold wasn't from the air conditioner, but from the dense, invisible space growing between two people who once understood each other by breath. When I came home late, Rachel didn't ask why. When I made morning coffee, she no longer added sugar to mine like she always had. The little details disappeared without warning, bit by bit, like a light drizzle wearing away at old paint on a wall we thought would last forever. One night after she'd gone to bed, I stayed in the living room, flipping through old letters from Lily, scribbled in purple marker back in 3rd grade. "I love Daddy Matt the most in the whole world." I didn't cry, but something cracked in my chest, quiet and heavy. Not because I regretted saying no, but because losing my place in my daughter's heart also meant losing my place in the marriage I once thought was unshakable. The next morning, I got up before Rachel, brewed a pot of coffee, poured 2 cups. But when she came down, she picked up hers without looking at me and walked straight back to her office. The other cup stayed there, faint steam curling in the morning light, cooling in silence. I was mowing the lawn out back when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from an unknown number, but the name signed at the end made me stop. Andrew. I know it's sudden, but I don't have any other choice. Lily and I are in trouble. I just lost my job at the delivery company, and we're behind 3 months on rent. The landlord gave us 10 days before eviction. We don't know who else to ask. Please help. Just this once. I read it 3 times. The feeling wasn't surprise, it was more like confirmation. Once again, the familiar cycle repeated. Gregory vanished, and I was the one they called to patch the final hole. I didn't respond right away. I shut off the phone and kept pushing the mower through tall grass and weeds. The blade screeched, tearing through brittle thorns. Something inside me shredded with each turn of the wheel. That evening, Rachel sat at the table in silence until I set my plate down across from hers. You know Andrew messaged you, right? I didn't nod, didn't shake my head. She continued, her voice not sharp, but the emotion beneath it was boiling. They're really in trouble. You can't just abandon them. She's still your daughter. She's your daughter, Rachel? I cut her off, saying the words I'd always kept inside. She stared, stunned. What did you just say? I sat up straighter, my gaze steady. You know who Gregory is. You know what he's done and hasn't done. But on the most important day, Lily chose him. And even now, she still chooses to believe in him. So maybe now's the time he should step up. Ha ha, but he never has. Rachel nearly leapt from her chair. That's exactly why she always comes back to you. Don't you see? I answered with a voice like stone. No, Rachel. She comes back because she knows I won't say no. But this time, I will. Because if I keep doing this, everything I ever endured will continue to be dismissed. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I have nothing left to give. Rachel clenched her fists, lips pressed tight, tears brimming but refusing to fall. You're letting your pride cloud your love. No, I'm holding on to the last piece of my dignity. The air in the house thickened. I stood up, cleared the dishes into the sink, then went upstairs. Rachel didn't follow. Didn't say another word. Only the soft hum of the dishwasher echoed from the kitchen, reminding us that the conversation wasn't the end, just another fracture. 3 days later, I missed a call from Andrew, followed by another message. We're about to be evicted. There's no other option. I didn't reply. I didn't feel glad, but I didn't feel regret either. A week after that, Rachel walked into the living room with an unfamiliar expression. Her eyes were so conflicted I couldn't read them. Lily and Andrew have officially been evicted. They're crashing in Andrew's mom's tiny ground floor apartment. No space, no privacy. Lily's falling apart. I stayed silent. She continued. You see, this wouldn't have happened if you had stepped in. I poured a glass of water and replied in a calm, almost ruthless voice. No, Rachel. This happened because Gregory didn't step in. The man Lily chose, not me. She looked at me like I had turned into someone else, but in truth I hadn't changed. I just stopped pretending. That night, as I sat in the garage, rain began to fall on the metal roof, each drop cold and uneven. I thought about the apartment where Lily was staying. I thought about the face of the father who had been celebrated, now vanished without a trace. The message came on a Thursday morning while I was dusting off my woodworking tools. Can we meet, Dad? At Maple Ridge Park this afternoon. I just want to talk, not ask for anything. I promise. I read it over and over, not because I doubted the promise, but because something in the way it was worded made my heart slow down. It had been a long time since Lily had used the word Dad without expectation. Maple Ridge wasn't a big park, just a small green space tucked into a quiet neighborhood with a few benches beneath maple trees and a faded fountain. It had once been our place. I'd taught Lily to skip stones in the little pond behind the swings, held the back of her bike as she learned to ride. Those memories now felt like old film, faded and dusty. When I arrived, she was already sitting on a wooden bench near the tulip bed, hair tied up, wearing a faded denim jacket, her tired eyes unable to hide it. She stood when she saw me, forced a smile, and waved, like two people who might have known each other in a previous life. "Thanks for coming, Dad." I nodded but said nothing. She sat first. I took a seat a little distance away. Lily spoke, slowly and carefully. "I know I hurt you, more than I realized." I said nothing. The breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of flowers and the distant laughter of kids on the playground. I don't know why I believed having him walk me down the aisle was the right thing. Maybe. I just wanted to feel whole. Just once in my life. She paused, her eyes beginning to redden. But what I didn't consider was, in chasing some temporary right, I abandoned the one person who'd been there from the very beginning. I looked at her, and my voice dropped, not with anger, but with something heavier. "You didn't just leave me in a moment, Lily. You erased it all. 20 years. Every scar, every dollar. Every night I sat in an ER parking lot while you struggled to breathe. You didn't just choose Gregory, you chose to forget me." Lily bit her lip, tears sliding down her face, silent. "I know. And I'm sorry. Truly. If I could go back, I wouldn't do it again, but I can't. All I can ask for is a chance to make it right, if you'll let me." I looked at her. The grown woman before me wasn't the little girl who once rode behind me on a bicycle. She had made her choices. She had stumbled. She was facing it. But the pain in me couldn't be erased by a simple apology. Forgiveness isn't something you nod to during a conversation, Lily. It takes time. It takes action. It takes a reason to believe this time will be different. I understand. I'll wait. As long as it takes. I turned away, looking toward the playground where a father was pushing his little girl on a swing. Laughter floated through the air, clean, untainted. Lily handed me an envelope. Not money, not a request, just said, "This is a journal I've been writing the past few weeks, not for forgiveness, but so you'll understand what really went on in my head. It's not an excuse. It's a confession." I took it, slid it into my jacket pocket without opening it. "Thank you for coming, Dad. I won't bother you if you don't want me to. But if one day you need someone to bring you coffee at the workshop, just let me know." She stood, waiting for any reaction. I just nodded. No promises, no rejection. Just enough not to shatter her further. She turned, walking slowly away, her frame a little thinner than before. I stayed seated for a long time, fingers brushing the envelope's edge inside my pocket, unsure how to choose between memory and the moment. That fall came late. The maple leaves on the porch didn't start changing until the air had cooled for weeks. Rachel barely spoke to me anymore. The already rare conversations had turned into cold, dry exchanges. We lived in the same house, but like ghosts sharing divided space. I tried, cleaned up the living room, fixed the stuck window upstairs, cooked dinner like I used to, but it all earned only distant glances or stretched out silence. I understood. In Rachel's eyes, I had abandoned her daughter, then looked away as she hit rock bottom. To her, I was the one who dropped the torch, no longer worthy of being called family. One Friday night, I got a call from Sophie, Rachel's best friend for over 15 years. She asked if I could come fix the back door hinge, said Rachel was busy, and she didn't have anyone else to ask. I agreed because, at that point, I needed anything that made me feel useful. Sophie had always been upbeat, quick-witted, someone who could lighten any mood. But that day, she didn't smile as much. When I finished, she made me a cup of coffee and sat across the table, her voice soft. "I know things between you and Rachel aren't okay, but I want to say, I don't think you're wrong." I looked up, unsure how to respond. Not everyone can keep giving without ever receiving, Matthew. Everyone has a limit, even the most patient. We talked longer than planned. The conversation drifted to old memories, when Sophie would help Rachel drop Lily off at school, when the three of us had dinner the first Christmas after Rachel and I got married. After that, Sophie started calling me more often. Sometimes it was to fix a loose chair leg, other times to ask about a wood stain I had once used. But I wasn't naive. I knew it wasn't just about home repairs. I wasn't looking for anything from her. But in the moments when Rachel felt like a stranger in my own life, Sophie was the only one who truly listened. It happened on a rainy night. I took shelter at her place because a fallen tree had blocked the road home. The house was warm, lit by soft yellow lights, with rain tapping steadily on the windows. Sophie didn't say much, just sat beside me in silence. Then she placed her hand on mine. We didn't say anything, we just let the silence happen. I won't justify it. It was a mistake. But it was also one of the rare moments I felt seen, not for what I had done, but for who I was. I confessed to Rachel 2 weeks later, when keeping it in started hurting more than the truth itself. She looked at me like I had died long ago and she had just received confirmation. So none of it ever meant anything, did it? Her voice shook, not with pain, but with fury. I didn't know how to respond, because if I said yes, I'd betray myself. But if I said no, I'd be denying her pain. Lily found out the very next day. I got a short message from her. "You're not my dad anymore. I wish I'd never sent that text in the park." I deleted the message without replying, not because I didn't care, but because I knew no explanation would matter at that point. Rachel told me to move out within a month. The divorce wasn't messy, but it was numbingly cold. I signed every page like a machine. No tears, no regrets, just an empty space I didn't know how to fill. I moved into a small apartment in the suburbs of Spokane, near the old lake where I used to fish with Brian. I never saw Sophie again. She withdrew after everything, maybe unable to carry the weight of betraying her best friend. That story ended quietly, just like it began. 2 years later, on a drizzly afternoon, I received a message from Lily. "I know I was wrong. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I just want you to know, to me, you're still the only one who ever truly lived up to what a father should be." I read the message inside my car parked by the lake. The wind blew softly. The water rippled. Not out of bitterness, but because I was learning how to let go. Everything had broken. But in the wreckage, I chose to keep walking. Matthew spent over 20 years loving and sacrificing for a family that didn't share his blood, only to be met with betrayal and silence. When he finally stopped, they called him heartless. But in truth, it was the first time he chose to protect himself. In the quiet aftermath of loneliness and collapse, Matthew was no longer the fixer, he became the survivor. And in the end, he realized some wounds don't need healing, only release so peace can take their place. What do you think about Matthew's choices? Was he cruel or simply human? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, heartfelt stories about family, forgiveness, and the true meaning of love.